Dealership said so, so I did. This all started December of last year and just finished last week, so bought a car from one of those buy here and pay here places. I love the car, it's a Mazda 5 from 2014, basically the smallest minivan I've ever seen. Well, on Christmas we drove to some family for dinner and celebration. When we went to leave, the car would not start. We checked everything and found out the horn wasn't even connected, any fuse that wasn't absolutely needed was simply missing, and the tires were the original tires. Beyond that, we hooked up to the computer and it read several errors, but the one getting in the way was the immobilizer. I had never known the van had one. I called AAA and set up towing, but because we were in the middle of nowhere, AAA couldn't get a tow truck to us under our membership free, so we had to call a tow truck and then submit the bill to AAA after the fact. So, family let us borrow their car and the van was towed to a shop. A few days later and the shop calls and tell us what's wrong. I live in Texas, a single-party consent state, and I record all my calls thanks to an app on my phone. The long list if car issues isn't important. The point of this van is a basic work van. The only issue they found stopping it from running is the immobilizer is active and they can't touch it without talking to the dealer. I 3WAY call the dealership and the shop and we talk for 17.43 minutes. During this call the dealership acknowledged we were not behind and everything should be working unless it malfunctioned. The dealership also gave permission for the shop to bypass it and we would be reimbursed the towing and repairs. All the shop needed to do to get the van running was bypass the immobilizer, and a couple days later we picked up the can and paid the bill. Both bills came to just under $300 and we started calling the dealership. The first few conversations go well and the phone rep seem interested in helping, but mostly I end up getting tossed around from department to department and then disconnected. That went on for some time and I of course took to Reddit to find out options. As almost always happens, Reddit users know some crazy facts and how to get stuff done, so I followed their advice and kept calling, eventually getting to a supervisor, and the first supervisor said he'd get it taken care of and we ended the call. 2 more days go by and nothing is heard. So I call back, get tossed around and then get another manager who says we are not responsible for mechanical issues and hangs up. I call back, now quite annoyed, and eventually get back to the same manager. I explain I have all the information and call recordings including the repair shop 3-way call. He cuts me off and says, "What? Are you going to take us to court over $296.47? I don't think so, but go ahead and sue. We will win, and if that small amount is worth suing to you, you probably don't have the resources to actually sue." This of course made me quite upset. So off to a justice of the peace and explain what's happened. They give us a small claims form and explain the process. We can fill it out and pay for a constable to serve the dealership, or fill out the paper and take it to the dealership unfiled and explain everything to a manager in person. We chose the cheaper route because the manager on the phone was right. We didn't have the money to have it served, only filed, so we transcribed the phone calls. Found out how to fill out the paper. The hardest part was finding the agent. We didn't know what that meant, but we again turned to Reddit and learned. We gathered the bills and all the paperwork and made our way to the dealership's payment center. I wait in line and see the name of the manager is the same as the manager on the phone that told me to sue. I wait in line, and when it's my turn I ask to talk to John, and he comes over and sits across from me. After making introductions and I confirm it's the same guy, I start to explain the situation again. As I'm explaining, I see when he recalls talking to me on the phone, she starts to dismiss me, and I explain that he asked me to sue and I'm here with all my evidence and the unfixed suit. Giving him one final chance. He starts to look over the papers and asked if I still had the recordings. I said yes, I could email him a copy. We sit and talk for about an hour as he reads. Then I sat with a slight aggravated tone. If something isn't done today, not only am I going to head right back to the courthouse and file as well, tack on as much for emotional distress and whatever else the clerk hinted at. The clerk was very open-mouthed with ideas, as well as send a copy of everything to every email on the corporate website. At this our conversation drew the attention of a woman in a power suit who rushes over for a recap. I find out she's John's boss's boss, and she's none too happy about how far things have gone. She assured me that all would be made right and gave me her cell number and email. I gave her the papers and left. The next Monday at 8 a.m. I got a call asking if credit being applied to the account would be acceptable. I say yes and she explains they will credit $500 to the account as payments. The payments are only $155 every 2 weeks. I agree and we talk for a few minutes when I ask why it took this much just to get things done. She laughed and said it shouldn't have and certain people are no longer employed at the company. Well, today was Wednesday and the day of the payment, but when I went to make the payment it was already done. Thank you, Power Suit Lady.
Now to the comments. Thank you, Power Suit Lady. In my head this lady was Samus Aran and no one can convince me otherwise. Glad you got your comeuppance on them.
She assured me that all would be made right and gave me her cell number, morphed into a ball and disappeared through a secret tunnel.
Good management, aside from the grumpy guy then.
It's always middle management that like to go on power trip. Those people probably have inferiority complex. I'm management but I still have to kiss ass, boo-hoo. I need a way to feel mer power.
I am middle management. My job is to shield my guys from shitty customers, coach them on when not to do something dumb and make sure everyone follows process. It's thankless but it pays the bills. If I'm at fault I own it and move on. Better to live another day and move forward than to be eaten by the dragons. My power is minimal at best and honestly, I don't even want the responsibility. If that small amount is worth suing to you, you probably don't have the resources to actually sue. What a wonderful world we live in.
The idea is to lessen trivial court filings. Reality is the wealthy can bully the poor one way or another.
Should be a percentage of net worth with a sliding scale skewed against the wealthy. I work in an adjacent industry, heavy trucks, and have worked for several truck dealerships. I do not understand why some people feel the need to be difficult about what is, in reality, a petty amount of money to the dealership, but is a meaningful amount of money to the customer. Dealerships practically print money when done right. It's not that big of a deal. In the early 2000s the used truck salesman at the dealership I worked at sold a Kenworth T600 for about $25,000. As his sale. The customer had huge problems with the truck right away and the dealership ended up paying well over $30,000 in repairs on that truck. Seemed like we got taken advantage of on that deal. A couple years later that same customer bought 30 brand new trucks from us. We took care of him. When he was ready to grow, he took care of us.
Most places are becoming run down into the ground with get-rich-quick and less effort types. Janelle Ford's in my area is such dealership. Had a family member take their truck in for on-the-books recall issues. They gave them a hard time and refused to fix the passenger side lock system and tailgate, claiming that they weren't being used so they wouldn't fix it. Ended up calling Ford directly to report that franchise owner and went to a much better Ford dealership 3 towns away that fixed everything within 48 hours.
Deleted. As an ex-Mazda 5 owner, lost it due to accident that I wasn't at fault. It's a great vehicle. Glad it got resolved for you.
Its predecessor, the Mazda MPV, we affectionately called the most perfect van because it was such a great vehicle. My parents had one for several years, and then my sister had one in which she, her 3 small children and I survived a major collision with a semi. That thing took a direct hit and no major injuries to anyone.
I sold Mazdas for about 6 months in 1999. 2000? Something like that. It was the year the new Miata debuted, the first one without barn door headlights. The MPV was the only van I ever really liked. It was very van-like while also still being a RWD vehicle, and having the towing capacity of their trucks. They kinda marketed it as a minivan for the SUV lover. I've worked in car dealerships most of my adult life and stories like this make me so ducking angry because John should and could have just fixed your problem for a few pennies and instead tried to power trip when his job was to go to Power Suit Lady and get it approved. We do shit like that every single day. $300 is trash can money. Glad you got a couple extra bucks for your headaches.
I have to ask, since you know dealerships, is this immobilizer thing in all modern cars? Can someone just shut me down for missing a payment?
It's an added part that those buy here pay here dealers put on their cars. In addition to immobilizing the car, it also reports GPS positions back to dealership to make it easier to repo.